Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loki here. Join me today as I show you what I'm doing garden related during a heat wave. So let's go. We are currently in my barn. Please excuse the mess behind me and all around me. I love this space. It stays nice and cool. And I have to tell you, for New Hampshire, we've been experiencing a lot of heat. And it's my understanding a lot of you are going through the same thing. The last number of days have been in the mid to high 90-degree Fahrenheit range. Today's supposed to hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Tomorrow, another day of 90-degree Fahrenheit. And then we're in for a little bit of a cool down before it heats up again. One thing I've learned during the last many years of gardening is I can still garden around this funny weather that we experience, be it extreme heat or even extreme cold temperatures. Since I love to garden, I don't like to just give in to the temperature, be it extreme heat or extreme cold. I try to find things that I can do that are still garden related and make sure I'm doing it in a safe way. So I'm just going to talk about what I'm working on today and bring you along. So I hope you enjoy this video. The other day I made a video showing you my process for potting up some calla lilies. I didn't finish it, so we're going to just do that quickly together. This is one of the pots I'm going to use. I want to point out that I did not have drainage holes in it, so now I do. I just used a drill and I made the holes in the bottom. I like to make my own potting mix because I can save a lot of money that way. It's basically a DIY mix composed of 3 parts of peat moss to 2 parts of homemade compost, a half a part of perlite, and a half a part of vermiculite. I mix it all up and it's now ready to go. In many of my container pots, I like to use Osmocote. It's a slow-release fertilizer. I like to buy it in bulk on Amazon. I also like to use bulb tone when I'm working with different bulbs, tubers, and corms. So when it comes to calla lilies, I can use either the Osmocote or the bulb tone. Either one would be fine. Just read the directions on the package just so you know how much to use. When it comes to me, I just use a small sprinkling of either one. Because I like to make a lot of container pots, the big thing I've learned over time is I don't have to make the container pots completely full all in one sitting. In other words, for example, today, I would be so happy to get a whole bunch of these plants that are in their small little pots, like the calla lilies, my canna lilies. I have other plants that really need to get moved into a bigger pot. If I can just move them out of their small pots into a big pot like this, they're going to be so much better off. Then I can come in on a later date and I can add different spillers or different fillers. But for today, I really just want to focus on getting a lot of the plants that I have in their small containers. Basically, I pre-sprouted them, and I want to move them up into their forever home for the summer, which would be a nice, pretty big pot. And then on a different day, I can come in and add all the other little things around it. And if I don't get to it, that's totally fine too, because a plant right in the center will still look pretty. I always like to make my potting mix in bulk, and I like to make it in a tote because it just is a lot easier for me rather than making small little amounts. I can make a nice big amount that's ready to go. For all my container pots, I don't like to have the potting mix all the way to the top. I want to leave about 1 inch from the top down to where the potting mix is, so that when it rains really heavily or if I need to add irrigation to it by hand, if I have to water it, I don't have a lot of potting soil that's spilling off the side. For this pot, I've decided I'm going to add 2 nice groupings of the calla lily, and I'm going to put them right towards the center here. And at a later date, if I want, I can add some sort of a spiller or filler on either side here. We have our slow release fertilizer. The name of this calla lily is called Grape Velvet, and the roots look really nice ever since I pre-sprouted the rhizomes. These are going to get planted about 1 to 2 inches deep since they're just in a container pot. If I was going to plant them in the landscape, they would be a little bit deeper, maybe 3 to 4 inches. I'm going to add my label just so I can remember the variety, since I have a number of different varieties of calla lilies. And we'll put the other one right over on this side here. During this hot weather, I'm also finding that I have to water all of these small pots frequently. So for a number of reasons, I have decided to work on this project because it has to be done anyway, and I won't be watering these pots as often as I'm watering the smaller pots. These roots look really healthy too. If they were circling around, meaning if they were pot bound or root bound, I would go ahead and loosen them up just a little bit. I don't need to do that though because the roots are very loose, so they look great. As I work, I like to nest all my pots and containers. The old me used to just take them and chuck them here and there and everywhere. But then I found that it was such a pain for me to clean up after I made such a mess. So it's almost like when I'm in my kitchen. I like to clean up as I go. I just find that it's a lot easier, at least for me, that way. I'm just backfilling. I'm putting additional potting mix in here. And by the time I do this, those rhizomes will be about 2 inches deep, which is perfectly fine. And we're just going to give it a drink of water. I'm keeping this in a shady area for at least 1 or 2 days, just because it is so hot. And I want the plant to take it easy, and it'll be ready to go once the weather cools down. In fact, you'll see right over here, I have a whole bunch of plants that I potted up recently from my backyard plant nursery. I did the same thing. I gave everything a drink of water, and they're taking a break for a few days. We have rain coming, the weather will cool down, then I can move all those out to my plant nursery. The space that I'm in, I shut the door just to keep it nice and cool in here. I even have a little fan. You kind of have to do what you need to do when it comes to gardening. And this really works out well for me. It just makes me so I can be still tackling jobs while not dying in the heat that's outside. I found a whole bunch more pots, so I'm going to go ahead, fill these up with potting mix, do the same process with the rest of my Calla Lilies, and let's work on a different plant after this. The next plant we're going to work on is Amaryllis. And I should have mentioned earlier, when it comes to Calla Lilies, they are not hardy here where I live in my New Hampshire Zone 5B climate. The same is true for Amaryllis. Where you live, you might be very lucky, and your Calla Lilies and even your Amaryllis might be hardy. You might be able to leave them in the ground. Where I live, I can either buy them every year, and really that costs so much money, or I can try storing them or overwintering them. I have a lot of videos that talk about my process for overwintering things like Calla Lilies or putting Amaryllis bulbs in for dormancy and then waking them up. I'll put links to those videos down below. For today, what we're going to do is we're just going to pot up these Amaryllis bulbs. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, they're already in pots. They are. Some of the pots are very small. And actually, usually when you pot up an Amaryllis, you put it in a nice small pot. With all this hot weather, I am constantly watering these guys. I would much rather put them in a little bit bigger pot so that I don't have to water them so frequently. And then what I'll end up doing is taking them out of their big pots when I put them in for dormancy, probably the end of August. When it comes to the Amaryllis, I could have kept these indoors as houseplants, but I like to just bring them outside. Basically what they're doing is they are taking the sun's energy and they're feeding the bulbs so that these bulbs can bloom for me later in the season, preferably around Christmas time. And since they were little baby bulbs, I put them in this small little pot temporarily while they were indoors. I knew that these bulbs were not going to bloom for me during their first year. So I'm just going to remove them out of this pot. And I'm squeezing the pot to loosen the soil. You can see that the roots are really pretty tight. They're circling around. So I might as well go in and just loosen them up. And this is a job that I really could have done as soon as my average last frost date passed, which was around May 15th. But I didn't get to it, and honestly, these could stay inside of this little pot if I wanted to until the end of August. But I would prefer, for a number of reasons, to take them out of that little pot and put them in this bigger pot. And the biggest reason, like I mentioned earlier, is I won't have to water these as often. And also, I think it's just better for the plant in general to have a little bit more room in here. It's better for the roots and everything else. So I'm just trying to loosen the roots very carefully because I want to pull these apart at this point. Now, these were baby bulbs or bulblets that came off of a mother plant. So they might bloom this coming winter. We'll have to see. And if not, at a minimum, you want to just keep them alive and you want the leaves to keep growing so they keep feeding the bulb so the bulb can get bigger. And these bulbs have gotten bigger over time. They were much smaller when I first pulled them off the mother plant. And I'm just going to sprinkle some bulb tone, just some fertilizer for these Amaryllis bulbs. On the back here, it mentions all the plants that you can use this bulb food for. Keep in mind, you can use it for a lot of other bulbs that are not listed on here. One of them would be Amaryllis, and like I mentioned earlier, I could have used this for Calla Lilies as well. And since it's organic, if you give a little bit too much fertilizer by mistake, it's okay. The plants will not end up burning. So we're just going to put one on this side. When it comes to a planting depth, you want to make sure that you're not planting it too deep. You want the shoulders of your bulb to be above the soil level. So I'm not going to fill this all the way up to the top. And what I'm planning to do is I'm going to put 3 small bulbs in here. That way, in terms of the soil level, all the bulbs will be almost similar. I was thinking of putting a much larger bulb right here, but that would mean that that bulb would need to be at a different soil level, and I want all of these to be about the same in terms of their shoulders showing. So we'll take this guy and put this in here, and we might have room for a 4th one, but let's see how we do. This didn't really have as extensive of a root system, which is fine. And then this final one here has a label with it. The other ones did not, so I'll be sure to tuck in a label next to this bulb right here. I'm just lifting them up a little bit. With any bulb, be it the Calla Lilies, Calla Lilies, Amaryllis bulbs, it's important to keep them well watered, but not overly watered. If you overwater any of your bulbs, elephant ears, you name it, there's so many different bulbs out there, you could potentially rot out your bulbs. So I always say love your plants, but don't over love your plants because you don't want to kill them. Now that this is done, I can give this a drink of water, and then this will stay in the shade for a few days. After that, it can go out in a sunny area and continue to feed the bulbs. All this potting up is making me so happy. I'm not going to let the heat bother me. I just have a lot of this to be done anyway. So to be honest with you, I often will wait for certain days to do certain jobs in my garden. And I knew we were going to have a number of hot days like today, which is why I saved these projects for today. Sometimes it just happens where the leaves get bent over and they flop. As long as you have other leaves here that look good, in fact, I have one coming through the center here, it is totally okay to snip those off. It just happens. Sometimes the wind hits it or something hits it and a leaf gets bent. As long as there's enough leaves there to help photosynthesize and feed the bulb, you should be fine. Let me go ahead. I'm going to plant these 2 in one pot, put them in the shade, give them water, and then we'll work on the next project. It's a whopping 94 degrees and it's 11:30 during the day, but we are still making great progress. Look at this weedy mess. There are a whole bunch of spring bulbs inside of these containers. They bloomed beautifully for me during this past spring. And as many of you know, I love growing spring bulbs in container pots. They've been sitting out here, they've been getting sun, they've been getting rain. They have either fully died back or almost died back, but I can assure you they've gotten all their energy stored for next year. So let's go ahead, let's grab a pot, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do next. When it comes to spring bulbs in pots, there are a number of things you can do with those bulbs. One thing is you can simply leave the bulbs in the pots that they're in. I've never done that, but I know a lot of people like to do that. So you would basically just keep them in their pots, make sure that they don't rot, but make sure you're keeping them watered. The bulbs basically go dormant. They go to sleep, so the top growth that's there, you can cut it all back once the bulbs have stored enough energy. Usually you know that they've stored enough energy when 6 to 8 weeks have passed after the bulbs have bloomed, or when the foliage has started to turn brown. You would just cut back that foliage and then you would just leave the bulbs in their pots. Another thing you could do is take the bulbs out of their pots and you can go ahead and just put those bulbs somewhere in your landscape as long as the bulbs are hardy where you live. Another option is you can take the bulbs out of their pots and you can remove all of the soil, all of the top growth, and let the bulbs dry out for a few days somewhere where it's cool. And then after that, you can go ahead and store your bulbs in a cool location. I have a whole video that explains that process. I'll put a link to it down in the description below. That's the option I'm going to go with. And then later in the season, usually in the fall time, I can then go shopping in my basement. That's where I store my bulbs. They're in paper bags, and it's in an area where it stays about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So let me show you the first step in this whole process that I'm going to do with these bulbs. A friend of mine gave me these daffodils in the late spring. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them, so I just put them in these pots here. I wanted to make sure that the bulbs got their energy stored, so that at this point they have enough energy in them, and it's time to just remove them from the pots. So we have one bulb here, and again, it's a daffodil. It's a small daffodil, and that's what that looks like. And I'm checking to see if there are any more. Here's another one. We have one here. Just basically fishing for all the bulbs in this area. So that's all I have out of that pot. So I can go ahead and lay these bulbs on this mesh tray. I like to use mesh trays when possible. Notice it has the holes in the bottom. It just allows the bulbs to breathe from all different corners. If you had a solid bottom tray, that would work too. Just make sure that the top and the sides are allowing for air to come into these bulbs. I'll let the bulbs dry for a number of days. After the bulbs are done drying, I like to remove any foliage that's left here, and I just snip it off. I can brush off a little bit of the soil, but if I do brush the daffodils or any of my bulbs, I want to be careful. I don't want to basically open up the bulb, and that can allow for rot. Then I take the bulbs, I put them in a paper bag, and then I label the paper bag. Then those bulbs go down into my basement where it's nice and cool, and they stay dormant in there until the fall time. When it comes to this potting mix, I like to just go through it, and if I find any sort of weeds or rocks, I'm just cleaning them out. I can actually then reuse this in some of my other container pots. One thing that I'm going to be experimenting with this year is taking these bulbs in the fall time and bringing them out of my basement, and then I'm actually going to pot them back up into some pretty looking pot, and then I'm going to sink the pots down into the soil. I can do that in a raised bed, I can do that out in my landscape, but I have a backyard plant nursery. I'm most likely going to sink those pots there. And it's basically almost like taking a bulb and putting it in the ground, but instead what I'm going to be doing is taking the bulbs, putting them in a pot, and then sinking the pot. But I'm going to wait until the fall time because this time of year things are very busy, and I don't have a lot of room right now in my plant nursery where I can put these. So it's easier for me to just let the bulbs be in the basement, and that's where they're basically going to be dormant for the remaining part of the summer. You'll have to let me know in the comments, what are some of the container pots that you have done? Have you ever grown bulbs in pots? And if so, what do you do with the bulbs when you're all done with them? And the same is true for your canna lilies or your calla lilies, especially if they're not hardy in your area. I'd love to know, what do you do with yours? Do you buy them every year? Do you overwinter them? And how about amaryllis bulbs? It's always fun fishing and making sure I didn't leave behind any sort of bulbs. I want to mention quite a few of these no longer have the green leaves on them. That's fine. They should have already built up their storage for next year. And if not, worst case, they will come up with leaves and some of them might just not bloom for me, which is fine. And I like to just use one tray per plant type. In other words, as I start going through other pots with some of my other daffodils or tulips, I'm not going to put them in this same tray. That way I'll remember that this tray right here has one variety of a type of plant. And I don't know the exact name because, like I said, I got these bulbs from a friend of mine. So I'd rather just keep them as is in one paper bag all by themselves. And all of this material here can just go into my compost pile. It's all pretty much falling off of the bulbs at this point. The location where I had these bulbs, they were definitely getting enough sun and enough water. So I really didn't have to, I just didn't have to worry about them. I just set it and forget it. But with that said, I can't forget about them too long. This is the time of year now that I should be doing this job. And it's a perfect day to be doing a job like this. Normally, if I'm out weeding or I'm out deadheading, this type of job just gets forgotten. So I try really hard to think about, what am I going to do on a really hot day in terms of gardening? Or what am I going to do on a rainy day? And that just seems to work really well for me. I'm always getting my hands dirty in the dirt, regardless of the temperature or the weather conditions. I'm going to go ahead and label these, and I'll just put that I got these from my friend, and I'm going to let them dry. Basically, I'm letting them cure. And then I'll come in after a few days, I'll cut off the tops here. If there were a ton of roots, I could come in and trim the roots. And I will then put these in a paper bag. These will get stored in my cool basement. And then after that, come fall time, I can go back to my basement and start planting these out. And you could do the same thing if you wanted to. You could take them from your basement or your cool area where you're storing them, and you could even put them out in your landscape in the fall time. There are a lot of options on what you can do here. As I'm working on the spring bulbs, I wanted to mention I'm taking the soil, I'm really mixing it well with the potting mix that I already had made before. Keep in mind the potting mix that I made has great nutrients in it. It has compost. So I'm basically recharging or refreshing the spring bulb potting mix with the new potting mix that I already made. I also decided to share this tray here. So there are the daffodils that we worked on earlier. And on this side here, these are called Dutch Iris Mix. And I figured since I didn't have too many of these, I didn't have too many of those, this would work out perfectly. I will also show you that the Dutch Iris Mix have little babies on them. You can see them right here. I'm going to leave them on here for right now, but once these dry out in a few days, then I can always come back in here and pull these off. You can do that before or after. Just know that when it comes to any sort of bulbs that have little offsets on them, they most likely will not bloom for you the following season, but I'm fine with that, with planting these up in the fall time in a container pot, sinking the container pot, and then they should at least put on some growth up on top as well as on the bottom. I also made sure that the little smallest bulbs were not falling through the mesh of this tray. The pot that I'm working on right now had tete-a-tete daffodils in them, and that's what's over here. So you can see, again, if I wanted to right now, I could go ahead and divide. This was probably the original bulb that I planted last year, and you can see there's another one right next to it. The other spring bulb that I had in that tete-a-tete daffodil pot were Glory of the Snow, and their bulbs are very tiny, so I want to make sure not to place them in this tray. They're going to go in a different tray. So I'll be coming in and pulling all of these out. Look how small that is. I'll go through all the potting mix here. I'm sure I will miss a few. What will happen is this potting mix is going to get reused. It's very likely that there will be small bulbs that end up sprouting sometime in the near future. We're not going to worry about that. When it comes to all my spring bulbs, I'll be keeping them here in my barn where it stays out of the sun and it stays dry. And those are the two main things you're looking for. It's not terribly cool here, but that's okay. It's just they're gonna dry out, and then once they dry out and I clean them up, I will be storing them in my cool basement. When it comes to tackling a project like this one, the reality is it's gonna take me a number of hours. And I set a goal for myself to start and finish taking out all of these spring bulbs. And I want to make sure I get it done today. And even though I wanted to work on other bulbs with you today, like my elephant ears, my Calla Lilies, and many other plants, I would much rather just continue working on this project here. This is such a great project for me to be doing on this hot day. I really hope that you're staying cool. And I also want to stress that even if you see someone on YouTube like myself working on a really hot day like this, don't feel guilty if you're just taking it easy. Maybe you're having a down day. Maybe you're binge watching YouTube videos or whatever it is you're doing. Maybe you're going to the beach. I can't say it enough. You want to be doing what you enjoy. I actually enjoy doing this type of project on a day like today. I'm staying nice and cool. And once I turn that camera off, you better believe it, I'm also going to be binge watching and watching some YouTube videos in here. And that's something that I really enjoy. So I hope you got something out of this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments about anything you saw in this video or anything else having to do with gardening, please drop it down in the comment section below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.